Over the last 2 weeks, I've been inviting my audience to fill in my creative finisher assessment. And so far, 44% of the people who've replied have come up as messy middle stuck. That means almost half of those corporate professionals who filled it in have figured out that they're getting 30 to 50% into their projects and then they're running out of energy and abandoning them. So if you've ever come home from work feeling like you want to get on with things, but just not having the energy or the motivation to get to it in an evening, then this video is for you. So today I'm going to tell you Jenny's story, and I'm going to break down 3 ways, practical steps that you can take over the next couple of days and weeks to help unstick your projects and start to move forward. Let me tell you the story about how one meeting totally broke Jenny. Jenny's a senior graphic designer at an insurance firm, which means she spends her days kind of updating presentation templates and working on kind of corporate projects. She works a little bit with marketing, but mostly it's a lot of kind of internal work. Some of it sees the light of day through client presentations and kind of external work like that. But her real passion is she's an illustrator. And she's currently working on a children's fantasy book. And she was smart enough to be able to figure out to go to bed early and start getting up early. And she had some real success where she was getting up at 6 a.m. and writing and working on the illustrations to go along with the book. She's gotten 3 chapters in. But the endless back and forward over the tiniest minutiae and detail at work was just clawing at her energy. And there was one specific meeting where they spent 3 hours working on a project, kind of cross teams, and almost all of the 3 hours was spent just debating between 2 almost identical fonts. And she just had enough. She came home that day and she couldn't even look at her manuscript. She couldn't pick it back up. And day after day, she just felt so drained. She was then, thinking, oh, am I really cut out for this? She, was staying up late watching Netflix and doom scrolling on her phone, which meant that she wasn't feeling at all motivated to get up at 6 and continue her work. And even on the weekends or days she took off specifically to try and recapture some of that, there was nothing there, nothing happening. And she just couldn't regain the passion around her work, and it's just such a shame because the work's brilliant, but it's sitting there calling her and she's got no energy or motivation to get back to it because work is still dragging on. That project is still ongoing and still draining her on a daily basis when she's in the office. So what's the underlying issue here? It's not that it's a time issue. Clearly, it's certainly in Jenny's case, she still had time in her day to be able to get around to it. So it's not about kind of being smart about your time or scheduling. It's about energy and that energy depletion and that energy being used up in another place in your life. And that's all too common, particularly amongst the creatives that I speak to, where they're motivated and directed in a specific way, but because of life circumstances or just internal motivation, or just that by the end of the day they feel drained, and that's completely normal response. Also, I think there's a juxtaposition between our corporate selves, like our job titles, and maybe our creative selves, our personal selves, that they don't line up, and there's a little bit of a what's the best way? Kind of almost a tug of war, like a dichotomy. Yes, it's 2 sides of the same coin, but they don't completely align and they don't line up. So it sometimes feel like you're being a little bit disingenuous at work because you're not bringing all of yourself. And I get that that's quite normal because we're just there for 8 hours a day and we're showing up and bringing what we need to bring. But we get home, we have all of this other energy or persona or focus that we want to pour our attention into. And I think that that's important to recognize that as well, that there's a little bit of an identity piece there that we need to work on too. I've already mentioned about the messy middle, but often when that corporate stress kicks in and our projects get busy and there's extra demands at work, that it's often our creative projects, our personal stuff that's hit first. It's the first thing to go because we take on this extra load or demand of either time or energy, and it's got to come from somewhere. So usually the first thing to go is our creative projects. I've definitely experienced that many times, and you probably have too. And I also think when it's our personal projects, our personal creative stuff that's abandoned, it hurts even more because there's, like I said, in that identity piece, there's a certain authenticity of us showing up for our project, showing up for ourselves. And when it's sitting there taunting you and you're not able to get to it, that it feels even more like of a draw and a pull, and like it hurts more than a lot of things. So there's definitely an excitement, or a need to get back to it. Again, I get that. And I get that from a lot of people I talk to. Let's have a look at 3 practical strategies that you can use to help your projects and your energy get back on track. First thing to do is have a real look at your energy expenditure. When do you feel the most energetic? When are you excited? Now, I've said this before in other videos, but if you've gotten to my stage in life, you've probably got a pretty good idea if you're a morning person, an afternoon person, or a night owl. Like, you're going to figure that out. But first thing to do is to track that for a week. Have a look at, how you feel, how you respond to kind of additional questions about work, or can you do something? Like, if you're feeling energized, are you ready to jump into work, or are you feeling a bit deflated? Are you feeling a bit tired? And that might be related also to, hey, I've just had a huge big lunch and I'm having a little bit of slump while my body's catching up. It could be subtle things like that. So pay attention to that. Best thing to do is just have a page in your notebook or a note on your phone and just going to track that over a week. Because when you can focus your creative time into those spaces, then you're more likely to make some progress, even if that's just a small amount. Speaking of small amounts, strategy 2 is just have a 15-minute check-in with your project. Even if you're not ready to take it on, check in. Read the last paragraph that you wrote, or re-listen to the last piece that you recorded, or have a look at your sketches and see what it inspires. See where you're at. Check in with yourself. Check in with your own kind of personal feelings and reactions about it. And you may have to let go of some of that project guilt in terms of not being able to get to it, but honor that and recognize that that's just you wanting to make progress and wanting to move on. So just spend a little bit of time checking it back in so that when you can find a little bit more energy, and find them in those slots that we've already described, then like when you come back to it, it won't be completely abandoned. You'll have had a quick review of it, and that'll be really helpful to kind of get you moving forward really quickly. And strategy 3 is a really simple one. Honestly, it takes 60 to 90 seconds, and that's create a boundary between your corporate life and your home life. And if you're working at home, that might be something as subtle as closing your computer, putting it up on a shelf, maybe go and get changed, maybe go for a little walk around the block, maybe change up the music or the energy of what you're listening to try and create a bridge between your corporate life and it being at home. And that could be something as subtle as just dusting yourself off when you get in, putting down your bag, opening yourself up to being home and being ready to move on. Doing that on a regular basis just means that you're segmenting your work life from your home life. And that could be of benefit to your family, to people you share your home with, just showing up for yourself, not even related to this project. And all of those things are going to help create that energy and reconnect you to yourself. And that's will address some of that energy issue, but also a little bit of connecting you back to you and not feeling that you're just putting all of your life and your energy into the corporate, because there's so much more time and energy left in the rest of the day. So just to connect back into that and be aware of it. And I won't leave you hanging on Jenny's story. through these strategies and kind of getting on regular calls together, she's been able to get herself back into her work. And her work is progressing. She's making real progress and she's super happy about that. And she's finding a better balance between work and home life. And I think that's ultimately, where we want to get to, is to be happier, healthier, fitter, and more, able to deal with the ups and downs and the thinking about it as energy and not just about time or productivity. Because I don't know about you, but I want my creative explorations to be fun and to revive me and for me to enjoy it. And I think that's a really important piece to remember. It's about the enjoyment and connecting back to that. So if you recognize anything in Jenny's story, maybe it's time for you to fill in the assessment. The link will be in the description and in the pinned comment. It's 10 multi-choice questions. I promise it's only about 2 or 3 minutes of your time. And then what I'll do is I'll review them and I'm going to get back to you with your own video explaining what type you are and maybe a few other strategies which you can use to help you to get out of your energy rush or out of a place where you're feeling stuck and start moving forward. Filling in the assessment is just one other thing that you can do in terms of making sure and prioritizing that your creative projects, your own personal outpourings, don't become casualties of those energy sucking meetings. Okay, YouTube is going to suggest another video for you to watch here, but don't let that get in the way of you filling in the assessment or actually taking some time to review your project. But if nothing else, stay creative and I'll see you in the next video.